Okay, this video, we're going to talk about what are the drawbacks of using call tracking programs like callrail, call tracking metrics, mongoose metrics, and so forth. The programs that will help you when you're running PPC campaigns or driving traffic at a website to see that your campaigns are working, but not only that, what keywords are driving your sales or what ads are driving your sales, specifically and coming through phone calls or what are generating the phone calls in the first place. And, to be able to refine your advertising campaigns that you're running on Google ads, Facebook ads, or whatever, and make more money from your PPC campaigns or whatever you're doing to drive traffic to your site. So right away, I'll tell you that I've said many times on this channel that how and why you should be using call tracking if you're actually generating leads for a website and business that you have going using a two-step sales process. In other words, you generate a lead through some sort of landing page or website, and then you got to talk to that person over the phone or through email and get them to buy. Or if you sell something over $100 in value or cost and have an e-commerce site. So in other words, if you're trying to get people to check out through your website on their own, if you sell something over $100, generally speaking, people will call first or they'll need to communicate with you first to feel comfortable enough to buy. Not every time, but the higher the product price on average you have, the higher the frequency, they're going to have to talk to someone first. You get into the thousands of dollars range, like $2,000, everybody's going to need to talk to you before they have confidence to buy, basically speaking. So in either of those cases, are you generating leads or you're selling something over $100 and trying to run Google ads, Facebook ads, you're running any kind of other online advertising, you want to be using call tracking because that's going to be the one factor many, many times that's going to be able to get your campaign to work. However, there's drawbacks. There are a little bit of drawbacks to everything in life, and running call tracking is no different. There's specifically 6 different things that I've kind of ran across, heard clients complain about as we run a PPC agency here, of why they don't want to use call tracking, issues that come up, stuff that I've personally noticed that I want to give to you so that if you are thinking about call tracking or just are using call tracking, to be aware of what are the drawbacks or downsides to using the call tracking, given, basically speaking, you're going to be stuck with using call tracking because it's so damn valuable and so damn integral to be able to make money with PPC. Having to know what keyword someone typed in that got someone to call versus didn't call, what ad they clicked on to call and what got the ball rolling to get a sale with that person and from your traffic as a whole, time of the day of the week that people are searching, what device people are on, age, gender, so on and so forth. You can break all that down to see where calls are coming from versus where they're not coming from, so you can take budget away for what you're spending on stuff that's not working and put it towards stuff that is working, or certain audiences that you're targeting one over another. You basically are able to generally start out with a non-profitable campaign and make it profitable once you get enough data to show you where your calls are coming from versus not coming from. Respectively speaking, if you do e-commerce, you could technically get by without call tracking, but you're going to have more results with call tracking set up because the more quality data you have for your campaigns coming in, the more results you're going to get because you're going to make more accurate decisions on the revisions you make. But also Google/Facebook, they make their own revisions to the traffic they're sending you based upon your conversion tracking because they want their users to have a better experience as well. And they want to be able to help you to stay on as an advertiser too, somewhat. So the more data that they have, the better quality data that they have, the better they're going to be able to help you do that. Respectively, if you do e-commerce and the people spending the bigger money, because like I said, the more people spend, the higher the likelihood is that they're going to want to need to call you before they purchase or have the confidence to purchase or just get their questions answered that they absolutely need to have answered before they are willing to purchase or put their purchase through. the more likely they're going to call. So if with no call tracking and no insight as to the people that are calling, and specifically calling to order or through the phone, they give you their credit card information. If you take online orders, you're going to be missing a big chunk of the most important data that you have, where the biggest orders are coming from. The people that also are going to be buying in bulk are going to buy and spend the most money with you. And without the call tracking, you just simply won't know the keywords, the audiences, the ads, and all that drove those bigger calls. And so then you're going to be optimizing for only the smaller deals, both on your side, where you make your edits, and as well as on Google and Facebook side as they try to refine your ads. So call tracking is very important. Basically, bottom line is what I'm trying to say here. There are times where you could technically, it's borderline, you could get around it, and you'll know the benefits, which is the drawbacks of using call tracking by doing that, and just overall just have all the information you need to know if you still want to use call tracking, or if you do have call tracking, what to look out for, so you can try to, and there's also things that you can use to mitigate these drawbacks as well, which is why I'm giving them to you. You can actually do something about it, even if you have to use call tracking. Anyway, with all that said, here are the actual drawbacks to the call tracking if you're going to use it, if you have to use it no matter what. And with that, you can decide on your own. You're going to still use it, which most of you guys still should, but make your own mind up for yourself. Anyway, so out of the list of drawbacks from call tracking, the first one, and I put the most important and the ones that affect most of you guys the most, is I put all those on the top, and then I put the ones that affect the least people and the least in terms of the amount it affects people, in terms of effect on sales and so forth, as towards the bottom. The most important one then, that it affects most people, is spam calls or spam callers. So this is basically where phone numbers, I use callrail ourselves at our agency, or PPC agency, because it's the most reliable. It's also the easiest to set up and use. It might not be the cheapest, but as it comes to buying things for your PPC campaigns, you don't cheap out on anything, because you'll find that it'll mess up, or you'll go to try to integrate it with something later on after you've already invested all the time and effort to get it set up in your business, and it doesn't integrate with anything, and then you're screwed that way. So that said, you will be given, through the call tracking program, callrail, whatever you're using, some tracking phone numbers. Those tracking phone numbers are heavily used, and they churn accounts, and when somebody quits the call tracking service, they give their numbers to you, and then those numbers could be already known as numbers that are spammable by other people who call those numbers and try to sell you shit, or any other nefarious activities why they call. It might be scams that they're doing, whatever. What people actually do is they run scanner bots that go out on crawlers, in other words, or what they're actually called, out on the web. They find different phone numbers on websites, and then they put those into a list. They might sell that list to another company who actually does the spamming, but then they'll spam call there's programs out there where you can call one after a number and then just have a spam message, or they sell them to people that will physically call you and try to market stuff to you, of which all waste your time and are annoying. And so, respectively, if a certain number gets onto a bunch of different of these spammers' lists, because they trade the lists with, of numbers with one another, you could get spammed a lot. However, respectively, you can get the phone number swapped out with another phone number by calling. At least I know you can do it with callrail. I haven't checked at all of them, but pretty much I think all of them you can. You could say, hey, and you look at your call log in your call tracking program, and you see which because each call can be recorded if you set up the option for recording. You can listen to the call recording of the last 20, 30 calls, find out, is there, of the tracking numbers, which generally if you have dynamic tracking, which can track and is set up to track Google Ads and search engine advertising, so you can see down to the keyword level what keyword they typed in before they call. You can't do it with static number tracking where it's just one phone number. It can only tell you if somebody called from an ad, or did it call, or from a source, or did they not call. With dynamic tracking, you get a pool of numbers, like 4 different numbers, and at least with callrail, and this pretty much applies with the other ones, so that if there's more than one person on your site at a time, they'll be able to show the different people that are on the site or on your site at the same time different numbers, so they can keep track of specifically what were the metadata or traits of that user who got to your website and then called. It actually pulls all that information from the URL of on the search, or the URL address bar on your web browser. Because when you click on a Google ad, you'll notice if you look at the web page, it'll show the web page, and then question mark, and then UTM_source equals Google, UTM_medium equals PPC, and then the keyword, and then all that information is there. Callrail, or the call tracking provider, can pull all that information from the URL, and then when somebody calls, they actually grab that information through the JavaScript code you put on your website. So they could record the call, they could show you who, what number called your number, and it has all that other information about what ad they clicked on, what keyword they typed in, what time of the day they searched, and all that shows up ultimately in your Google Ads account, so you can do your optimizations, and allows you to do it even with multiple people on the site at the same time through the pools of numbers that you have. And so anyway, going back to what I was saying before, one phone number a lot of times is where all these spam calls are getting. If you get calls, it's dead air. You get calls and there's like a message playing. There's calls of people trying to sell you crap. Those numbers were scraped off of not even your website, but maybe the last website and last person who used that number at that call tracking service. And now you're using it, and respectively, you can go into your call tracking, listen to the last 20 or 30 calls, find out, because it shows you the phone number of your pool of numbers if you're using the dynamic pool, so you can track all the stuff about the user, not just whether they called from Google Ads or not, which don't help you optimize, which number it was, and then you can go to callrail or the call tracking provider and say, I do not want this phone number here because I'm getting a lot of spam calls from it. Give me a new phone number. And sometimes that will work, sometimes it won't. Respectively, if it's multiple numbers, which it a lot of times will, then that, you can't say replace all my numbers and then replace them. Well, you can, respectively, but in that particular case, what's happening is they're scraping the numbers off your site and then spamming. And I've seen sometimes we're replacing one number fixes it, sometimes it don't. It's about 50-50. But the other option is that it's gotten so bad recently, companies, including callrail that we use, has an option by default now, even though it has a major drawback to it, where once you connect and you call the call tracking number that shows up on your website, that replaces the number on your website, so that they can actually know when somebody called and then pick up all the metadata about that caller, what they typed in, everything, to where before they ultimately get to where they forward the call to your company, it'll say, press 1 to continue. And that's all it says. And the person's supposed to just know and think this is all legit, and then you press 1, and then it forwards you onto your normal business number, so that you can service the lead or the person calling in. Now, that actually takes care of these bots that auto spam a message to a bunch of different numbers on a list. Like I said, a lot of businesses that scrape numbers off your website do. It also gets people that physically try to sell you stuff on the phone, that are using a program, to a power dialer, as they call it. What they do is they call, and then once somebody picks up, it connects them with the person in the call center. So there's not dead time where the person has to dial physically and then wait for a connection, because a lot of people don't answer their phone. And it's a way to get, per human hour of talk time, more people for them to talk to, which makes the campaign profitable that they're running or not, or whatever, or potentially so. And so with that, if you have press 1 to continue, the auto dialing system that is running, with the call center that they're running to sell you whatever crap they're trying to sell you, won't get through the press 1 either. So it could cut down a lot on the purely robotic things where they're calling and leaving you or playing a voicemail or a voice message or whatever once you pick up the phone, or marketers who are trying to sell you crap because their auto dialer won't basically set you up to where you can actually talk to anybody because it won't get through that initial wall there where you have to press 1. Now that works. However, once you start doing that, like I said, and as any normal person could imagine, if I have to call my local chimney sweep company, and all of a sudden it says press 1 to continue, it's like, what the hell? I'm just trying to call this local company here and I've got to press 1 to continue. It seems less weird if it's a large company. But in any case, it still seems weird because it's not something you come across every day. Anything that's going to confuse the user in any of the marketing processes that you have, from the ad to the landing page to the time they're calling, will cut into your conversion rates. You are going to make less money because of it. And this is no different. So yes, you might think, oh great, I got the press 1 set up and now I don't have all these spam calls. But yeah, now you're making 20% less money. Okay, that 20% might be the difference between making a little and a lot. So you should know that up front. So I recommend not using that press 1 unless you have absolutely no options left. You have to have call tracking because you're running a local service where you're doing that 2-step sales process, like I said, and you got to know which keywords are getting the calls and not get versus which ones aren't, so that you can optimize the campaign. Eventually, if you got your campaign optimized, by the way, you could turn off the call tracking, just basically let it ride without the call tracking. That is one option for you if you don't want to. You don't have spam calls and don't want to have press 1, and that's press 1 is the only thing that gets rid of the spam calls. But just know if you use press 1, there's going to be drawbacks to that. And so it's gotten bad enough. Like I said, callrail, and I don't want to stain callrail's name. I really like callrail. We use it for every account. But or every account that fits these 2 criteria, at least, that I gave you here. And because it makes that much of a difference on your results, having that extra data for the algorithms to optimize your ads and for us to be able to optimize our clients' ads. That the press 1 isn't something that you can do, and you're going to get spam calls, and swapping the numbers with new numbers doesn't always work. You might have to put up with a lot of spam calls. When I say a lot, if you replace the numbers, it might be a few, but still a few is annoying. So you're always going to kind of have that as a potential drawback, okay? Know that, but don't go so far. It's just like having the form spam, where they contact form, of course you have the phone and the contact form, which, by the way, if you're trying to do a 2-step sales process, you want to have the phone number and the contact form, because some people like calling, some people like filling out the contact form. If you are dumb enough to only have one because you only don't want to talk to people but you want to have contact form communication, you're going to cut out a lot of times half your sales, depending on what you're selling and what market it is. But if you like half as much money, go ahead. Try not to talk to anybody. Having a phone number present alone and seeing that is a big trust indicator to show they have a problem with their order. They can actually talk to you versus send an email that's easily ignored. But respectively, pressing 1 to, having the user press 1 before the call connects is the equivalent of adding those CAPTCHAs on a contact form to block people who form spam, people going and filling out the form with free offers for, penis enlargement or whatever the hell they're doing. People trying to sell you marketing services, whatever. And the CAPTCHA, which a lot of people don't know what it is, but they don't know what it's called. It's the one thing that pops up and it's like 3 + 4 = what? Or please click the 2 images that look like a boat. Okay, now click the 2 images that look like a car. That really piss people off and absolutely cut into your conversion rates and therefore how much money you're making on your PPC campaigns by good 20, 30, 40% having that on. For anybody who wanted to fill out the contact form, 20, 30, 40% won't, just having CAPTCHAs on there. And the more harder it is to do the CAPTCHA, the more you obviously lose. But you even lose some just having what's 3 plus 1. That might only be 10%, but still, it's like not worth it. Find another way to get the form leads blocked. ReCAPTCHA, by the way, is the answer for that. You can Google that. But it's the same thing with press 1 to get rid of these robocalls and spam calls, because the phone number gets scraped and passed around to different marketers to spam the hell out of you. Now, that's okay. So that's the big problem with call tracking. Most of this other stuff, yeah, it's kind of like not ideal, but you can get around. You can deal with it, okay? And this one hurts. Basically, some people a lot more than others, depending on what business you're in. Phone number will confuse some people that you have on the website. So you have a tracking number. All of a sudden, your website gets this tracking number. People go to your website now, and instead of seeing the common phone number that they're used to dialing, which could occur, this is more important for reoccurring businesses where you get a lot of reoccurring customers, respectively, and loyal customers have been doing business with you for a long time. They may notice that the phone number, i.e. the tracking number that shows on your website, is different than the phone number they used to see. In addition to this, even if you don't have repeat customers in your business, you only sell to each person one time because they only need your, specialized, roof coating that you apply once in 30 years and that's it. You can specifically, they could get to your website. Sorry, drew a blank for a second here. They could get to your website, write the phone number down, or just remember it, try to memorize it for whatever reason. They're just trying to remember it because they're going to call later. Now, 2 weeks from now, they're like, I wonder, I had a question about this or that before I buy. They go to your website. Then they go check the number again to make sure they remember it right, and it's a new phone number. And they're wondering, why the hell is the phone number different than the last time I came to the website? Assuming they're on a different device, because if they're on a different device, the phone number, and also assuming there's more than one person on the website at a time, which would indicate that you're going to be shown the second number in the pool versus the first. Going back to what I was saying before, that can weird some people out, that they see a different number now that they're on their phone when they go to your website than they saw before when they were on their desktop device when they were on your website. This isn't a big thing. Most people won't notice it, but some people do. And a lot of clients, I'll admit, are worried about that type of thing. So the answer to that is you can change, or what little you can do about it, so to say, is you can change who the number rotates for. So meaning you can actually have the call tracking replace the phone number on your website, which it does dynamically by having the tracking code on the website, and then it looks for a phone number that you specify to look for, find the number, and then make the number their tracking number so they can track the calls coming in, and make the phone number look exactly the same font, color, all that than the original phone number did. So it doesn't look any different than what you intended your phone number to look like on your site. And you then can also have, before the phone number rotates, it checks with callrail or your call tracking provider and see basically, should it actually rotate for this person? You can actually specify the phone number to rotate for PPC only. It could, Google only, Bing only, so on and so on and so on. So what a lot of clients will do is they'll ask, I don't want my phone number to change because I don't want my loyal people seeing the phone number is different. I don't want people coming back and see a potentially different website or a phone number, like I said in the second scenario there. We'll have the phone number only rotate for PPC. And because we need most of all the data for PPC to optimize the ads, and so that they can live with that. It's like kind of meeting in the middle, if you will. For the most part, I would say, by the way, as a side to this, you want your call tracking set up to track all your visitors. Why? Because you want to be able to see general trends on how many people are calling from organic and all your other traffic sources as well as overall, because it's nice to say, okay, sales are down. Are we getting less calls than we got last July for this July? And be able to pull that data up. That's valuable data to have in a bind like that. And so in general, I would recommend getting your full kind of advantage of having call tracking to track other traffic sources than PPC. But if you really had a problem with it, just rotate it for PPC. Given PPC, it's not like nice to have, but necessary to have or mandatory to have to make money in your market, given your competitors in competitive markets that are doing other, let's say lead generation or whatever, are doing, let's say you're a roofer, there's other roofers, if they're doing call tracking and they could see down to the keyword, this keyword makes this much return and this keyword makes no return, and they can cherry pick all the good traffic, which means the keywords that suck are now cheaper because it's still an auction system. Now you're scooped because you want to pay the least you can per click. You're scooping up all the shittiest traffic. That might be the difference between you not making money and making money. So you got to, when you're talking about like Google ads, you got to be able to have a better click-through rate than everybody, or in the top 20%, and you got to have a better landing page conversion rate than anybody. But from the keywords that actually work. If you can find out what keywords work and you have the best click-through rate, the best conversion rate, you'll make money. If you don't know what keywords that work, you could basically never make money, no matter how good your click-through rate or your conversion rate is, or not nearly as much. And so anyway, those basic information about the phone number potentially changing and confusing people when you start, and something to think about as you are going to do call tracking. The third most important and prevalent thing that comes up in terms of there being a drawback using call tracking is sometimes you can't get a local area code for your call tracking pool, or the numbers that you have for that are given to you by the call tracking provider that are going to show up on your website. So there's a lot of, and this is, if it is affecting you, it actually affects you a lot. Otherwise, I would have put this as number one. In terms of the scope of how much it can affect you, it's just as important as at least pressing one if you're dumb enough to do that. But there's a lot of area codes out there in different areas. One of them, for example, is the Salt Lake City area. There's the main area code that most people are familiar with that has the oldest, most established companies, at least, have, and I can't remember the area code, but there's a certain area code where those have the oldest, most established companies. Because Salt Lake City kept growing, they had eventually come out with a new area code because there's not enough phone numbers. So in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, everybody kind of knows that if you have an area code with that new area code, you have a new number. So you can see where I'm going with this. If the area code with that new number is on your website, they can see you're a new company now versus an established company that's been around a long time, which might weird some people out. It certainly will. Guaranteed it will. You could, not just in general, the call tracking provider, depending on how shitty of one you're using, could just not have a tracking number with a certain area code in your area. And if you're only servicing like a small pocket of your general metropolitan area, and that's it, and not the greater, wider area, and they don't have tracking numbers that have the same area code as the area code that you're in, you are going to completely take a huge haircut on your conversion rates and how much money you're going to make from your ads. Not having phone numbers that match your area code in which the area you're actually in which the customers that you're serving are actually in. Because obviously they're going to look at the phone number, they're going to see it has an area code in an area outside of the area code that they're in which they know they want to deal with somebody locally, if possible, because this is a business where you want to deal with somebody locally. You're going to take a 15% or more hit in the conversion rate of the traffic you have hitting your landing page just by having the area code not match up and seem local. Okay? So you can't just use an 800 number and call that good. Respectively, if you're a local company, you do not want to be using an 800 number or 877 or 866 or 888, none of those toll-free numbers. You got to be using a local area code or a local number, because not just people want to, they know you're local, but you're more trusted if you're local, and they don't want to, also, they could think you're local. Your website could say, we're local. But if you're not using a local area code, they're going to think you're messing with them. And maybe you're not, but they're going to have to call and waste their time calling. It's easier in a lot of cases just to click the back button on their browser and go back to Google and click on somebody who has a local number. You're fighting the whole time the person sitting there going, should I go back? 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 And they're just looking for one excuse where it's easier to just tell themselves going back to Google and clicking on something else is easier than to try to finish what they're doing, what they came for in the first place. And as it comes to having to call and talk to somebody, they're talking about wasting 5 minutes of time to figure out that you're not actually local, in which they wanted to deal with somebody local, and that you really could be this area code that's I've never, it's outside the area, which I know they're not going to be able to drive to us that far, that they wasted 5 minutes for nothing. You got to be able to think like the consumer thinks, know what they need to hear, and give it exactly to them, exactly like they want to hear, because it's hard enough to make money when you don't do that. People want to know, do you do what they came for? Can they trust you? And do you cover their area? If you're talking about a local company, and you got to make that all extremely clear and not do anything to make people think otherwise if you're going to make a pile of money. So anyway, that is number 3. I think I made myself very clear on that. 4, number rotates slowly. Okay, this is another one. The call tracking number, I explained a little bit how this works just a little bit ago. Call tracking, at least if you're doing the dynamic call tracking where you can find out and grab the user's keyword and everything else, which you absolutely want to be doing. The only reason why you would use static call tracking is if you're tracking like having a phone number on a flyer, because you don't need dynamic call tracking. Any of the online search engine advertising, as well as display advertising on Google Display Network, you absolutely want to, and Facebook advertising actually as well, you want to be able to track down to the ad level and so forth what ad got this, the end campaign and ad group, all those that actually drove the call. So you can do your optimization on your ads like I was talking about, right? With that said, in order to have the dynamic call tracking work the way that it was designed, in that it is able to determine how many people are on the site, so it knows which number out of your number pool that you have designated to your account, it should show to that particular user who just hit the site. The person's got to get to the website, then the code that callrail or the call tracking provider provides you to put on your website loads on the user's browser. Then it signals the call tracking provider to decide which call tracking number to provide for you. Then that information gets sent back to your web server where your website's hosted. And then from there, then it puts the call tracking number that the call tracking provider knows it needs to put on there to make sure that they can track that user separately than other users who are on the website at the same time. And maybe it's only one, but it still has to check and run the logic engine to figure out should it show you this tracking number versus this one or this one or this one that you have in your call tracking pool. Okay, so anyway, this takes time. It takes a couple seconds, a lot of times, for the information to get, the ping, if they will, they call it in the networking world, the ping to go from your computer to this call rail back to your web hosting, and then that web hosting to pass that information back to your web browser to go in a big circle to have the information know which phone number to show. Okay, that takes again 2-3 seconds. Depends on how far the web hosting or the web server web hosting server is from your computer's location, as is how far callrail's server or the call tracking provider server is away from your web hosting provider and you. And the further it has to travel, the longer it takes. That when you're loading the website on your web browser, you get there, the user is loading the website. Usually the phone number has to go up top right of the page. Why? Because this is the general spot people always, or most often anyway, look for the phone number. So, and a lot of times as people are looking at the website, here's the website, the first place they always look is the logo, then it's the headline, and then they go up here to the right and they look at the upper right hand corner just because they do. This is just the way, heat maps have proven that. You can go look at common heat maps of certain websites and they show you what people look at first, second, and third. And this is all important to know how to make money with PPC or online marketing in general, because you got to know how to lay out your information as per what people look for in certain spots, so they can, going back to what I said before, get the information they need as quickly and easily as possible, so they least likely want to just leave and go get it somewhere else. So they're looking at the website. By the time they look at the logo and the headline, that can take a second or a half a second. Then they go up to look at the phone number, and what do you know? That phone number just changed into a new phone number just as I was looking at it. And then they're like, what in the freaking hell is this shit? They don't know what the hell call tracking is. So you have a problem. I can tell you for a fact, one thing that you could do to fix this issue is the call tracking code, which it's a JavaScript code that they give you to put on your website, so that when somebody hits the website, callrail, like I was saying before, can figure out which phone number to have shown on the user's browser window, and for the user's information about what ad they clicked on and so forth can go pass back to callrail when that person calls. The code that you though put on your website page, and that when somebody goes to your website, they're downloading the information off your website hosting server. They're downloading all the information to display your website on their web browser so they can see it. The order in which the information's downloaded off of your web server matters. In other words, you have to have this JavaScript code from the call tracking provider in order for call tracking to work. Where you put the call tracking code on the page will determine if it's loaded first, second, last, whatever. And given it takes so long, because that information has to go to callrail, then the web server, then back to you again, just for the thing to load properly, the phone number to load properly, having the call tracking code that the call tracking provider provides you in the what they call the head or header of the website makes it so that at least on the user's web browser, the call tracking code loads first. And that makes it so that the phone number will actually replace the existing phone number on the page, because your original phone number is actually still always there. All that happens with the call tracking code is it replaces the new phone number. That way, if the phone number doesn't actually replace because it's not working for some reason, you've still got a phone number there and they will always be able to see a phone number to call. But if it loads slowly, instead of loading right away and changing the number in like within the first 200 or 300 milliseconds, it will, after a couple seconds, it will replace the original number that's there, which is your normal everyday average number. And then they might notice it, as they're looking at the phone number or paying attention to the phone number, or just notice it at the corner of their eye. So anyway, in other words, put your call tracking code that the call tracking provider provides to you in the head section of the website, so that as the person's downloading the content of your website on their web browser, they get the call tracking code first, and that whole process of needing to have contact callrail and then the web server again and then go to your browser again with the right number to show, that happens as quick as possible at least. And it still may actually be kind of slow, but it'll be fast as possible. And least likely for the user to notice it that there's a phone number there and then it changed to a new phone number and it looks weird. And then anything that looks weird brings down the level of trust that you get. And, it's all, trust is one half of the whole factor, whether they buy from you or not. And the more stuff you do that they don't understand, the less likely you're going to get them to buy from you. But anyway, that's the whole thing with the number rotating slowly. That's going to be a drawback, what you can do to fix part of it. And with that said, we'll move on to the next one. Number 5, quitting can be a pain. So, respectively, quitting outright isn't a pain. You can just stop paying for your call tracking service. And for a while, the phone numbers will, that people get, the call tracking provider provides you and that were displayed on your website will still route calls directly to your main number for a few months at least, like at least 3 months. Most call tracking providers do that. So you could just stop paying and nothing will break. And of course, you want to get the call tracking code that they give you to put on your website off your website, because it's just going to be another thing that clutters up your website, and then another thing that's going to slow down the downloading of your website a bit, very little, but you just want to get it off. The issue is the call tracking numbers themselves. When people, they get to your website, of course, a lot of times they just call right away your phone number, or they tap on your number if they're on a mobile device. But if they're on a desktop device, a lot of times, if they don't call right away, what do? They just write your number, down on a piece of paper, and because they're going to call it later. And so a lot of people over time have your number written down somewhere, which they intended to call, but they didn't call right away. But then they put it on the refrigerator or whatever. And if you stop using the call tracking service, all those phone numbers are dead. All those potential sales you could have got from people that were just delaying, which there's way more than you think. The average person, it irritates me how much people think when they turn on their ads, it should just work, bang, right away, instantly rich. And the reality is when you start advertising, the ROI sucks because you don't have a whole built up list of people who are ultimately going to come back that are now officially starting to come back. So in a lot of spaces, and it's more the higher the price product or service you have, like if you sell something for a few $100, you'll have, for the first 6 months, you won't get the full return on your ads because you've got to build up a pipeline of people. It's like if you're doing phone sales to companies, you got to talk to somebody, they're not ready yet, that most people aren't ready yet, you got to talk to them, and then you got to call them later, and eventually they get to the point where they buy. Well, this same shit happens on websites. People get to your website, 80% of people have no intention to buy today, they're just doing research. You got to be able to, through your remarketing and outside your remarketing, just stand out as the person they're going to buy from after they've done the rest of the research and the time's right, they've gotten paid, whatever. They talk to their husband, wife, and respectively, then, because it takes a while for the average person to buy, it might take on average 2 months before the average person, if you looked at multiple years of how long it can actually take for someone to buy, the average time, if you look at over a 10-year time span of people, took the average person 2 months to buy. And so when you turn your ads on, they're officially or automatically not going to run as profitable, at least on paper. Those people will buy, but they're not going to buy it until an average of 2 months. So you got to run your ads for a while just to get a pipeline going, and having leads that have checked you out months ago that are now mature leads and are ready to buy, and today's the day to come back and buy, to make it look like the ads that are and the people that are clicking today pay off, if you catch my drift on all of this. So anyway, because a bunch of people, and people underestimate just how many people come back later. We have roofing companies that we advertise in the winter, in states where you can't even put a roof on until April, and people are checking out getting a roof installed in December because people do research way before they buy. And that's fine. And you're not going to make as much money if you don't advertise when people do the research, because if you wait till April, everybody else is kind of, most people have done their research already and decided who to buy, and you've lost most of your opportunity. So since you anyway know so many people you have to just do let the process happen, let people do research, let them click on your ad, let them come back, all of that. A lot of people, if they're going to be calling you, particularly, this is specifically relevant for services mostly here, they're going to be writing your number down, they're going to be saving it, And then when you turn off your call tracking, all those sales from your pipeline you built up, at least for the ones that wrote the number down and aren't going to be coming back to your website, are all dead leads, dead sales. So that could be 50 grand worth of sales, could be 100 grand worth of sales. We don't know. Well, you're going to throw 100 grand worth of sales in the toilet because you wanted to turn off your call tracking provider? Probably not. That said, with most call tracking services, they will let you buy out the telephone numbers, the tracking numbers they give you, for this very reason, that people don't want to lose all those potential sales of people who wrote down the telephone number, but still want to make sure they get those sales when those people eventually call. And with callrail, since that's what we use and I'm most familiar with their policies on, you can buy their telephone numbers for $3 outright. And of course, you can just have them route the calls kind of indefinitely to you, or you can get the number transferred to another provider itself. So, no, but not everybody will do that. And respectively, even if you buy the numbers, callrail is not going to redirect them forever for you. So, and I haven't done that process specifically myself. I've had clients that did it. I do need to find out how long they'll redirect those calls for you. If you just shut off your service, they'll redirect the calls for like a couple months already. But if you buy the numbers, what are all the options? They do have the option though to retain the number itself and make sure no calls that ever go through for the next infinity still come to you. But you just got to know that. So anyway, quitting is a pain because once you quit, now you got to contact the call tracking provider and set up to potentially get the call number, transferred or rerouted. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just something to be aware of. If you quit, it's not just you can't just get the code off your website and you're done. You're losing sales if you don't take that extra step I just told you about. So anyway, that's not a big problem really in terms of the other ones I mentioned, but that's why it's at the bottom of the list basically. But there is something also I wanted to mention. This is also at the bottom of the list, and 5 and 6, it was kind of the same. Number 6, phone takes another second to connect. So physically, going back to what I said actually several times in this video, anything you do to add a roadblock or confusion or struggle for someone to buy on the ad, the landing page, or the phone call that you're going to get when the person does actually call up, you're going to lose conversion rates. You're going to lose sales or a portion of your sales. That goes as far as the calls go, how many rings it takes for someone to answer at your company, how long you're put on hold. If you have a secretary that answers, that's great. But if they're put on hold for 2 minutes, you're going to start to have people drop during that hold time. I know this because we ran a study specifically on that exact thing, so I wanted to know myself. I've got a video about that topic specifically on this channel and talked about that very thing. The additional thing here then is, as it pertains to call tracking, is physically going back to what I was saying before, your call, has to go through or I didn't exactly explain it, but callrail or the call tracking provider provides you the tracking numbers. The tracking number replaces the phone number on your site. User goes to call that tracking number. They call. That call is actually routed through callrail's servers at their company, and then it's routed to your phone company, and then it's routed to your phone. So instead of usually what happens is when somebody dials your phone number on your website, it's routed to your phone company and then to your phone, you now have this extra step. It has to go through callrail. And callrail doesn't have a robust infrastructure, so that call technically has to go through a server that might be on the other side of the country. So it adds like another second, if you will, or basically around there. Might be a couple seconds, depending on the circumstances, that the user's got to have to wait before they're going to get a hold of somebody. So, or physically have the call connect, and you can go ahead when you start the call tracking service, try it for yourself. Just see how big the delay is. Then turn it off. Time how long it takes for the call to connect. If it takes a couple seconds, you may consider or not. You may think twice about doing call tracking if you were like on the edge of not really needing it. because that'll eat into your profits just a little bit, but permanently for as long as you have the service. So and with that, if you normally answer the phone in 2 rings, no big deal. But if you start to answer the phone after 5 or 6 rings, and then you add this, now you're talking about a big difference. It might be 10% of your sales, 5-10%. Why? Because as a part of doing our study about wait times and how many people drop off and how that affects conversion rates and profits from PPC campaigns, we also did a study about how many rings it took for how that affects the abandonment rates specifically. In other words, how it ties in with conversion rates on PPC traffic and having to have people call and all that. And the number of rings also affects, but only after a certain point. It's just like load speeds on a website. Load speeds don't affect your conversion rates until you get to a certain point where it's loading so slowly. Then that point is 2.3 seconds. After 2.3 seconds, the longer it takes for the website to load on your users' web browsers, the more sales you're going to lose. And as it comes to the rings, every ring after 4 rings is going to affect your sales a little bit. And then with the hold time, it's the same thing. After the person's waited over a minute, you're losing more and more of your potential sales there. So if you're, in other words, sum this up, if you're already, and you can obviously run this audit at your company, call your phone number, see how long it takes your secretary to answer. And if it takes forever, you may not want to add call tracking to the mix here. Because it's really you're in the red zone where you're going to start to have that actual extra second or 2 it takes for the call to connect now it will actually dip into your sales itself. The other thing, by the way, I see a lot of people doing that really hurts your sales is, and it may be a different situation if people are calling you based upon reputation. That's a whole different story. Or you're the only one in your space doing what you do, and that can also be a completely different story. Not always, but can be. Is when you call in and no one, for God forbid, if you call in and people, even 10% of the time or more, no one answers the phone, because nobody will, unless again they really, really want to work with you, nobody's going to leave a message. So you're losing sales. You can try to call people back right away, but the longer you wait to call them back, the more sales you're going to lose. But respectively, having those stupid ass IVR systems where it's like, hello, thank you for calling, for, sales, press 1. That also hurts the user's experience and therefore how much sales you're going to get. I would recommend, if you've got already a secretary, send the call directly to the secretary. Don't have that stupid system, at least for your PPC campaigns itself. That's just another general tip and a lot of people think about, and they should be thinking about it, because it cuts out the time it takes for that user to talk to somebody. The longer it takes between the ring times and then the IVR system and then the hold times to get to the actual person that can tell them about the pricing and all that. And so just talking to the secretary doesn't count. The more of that shit you add, the less you're going to sell. So anyway, that's the last thing on my list. And so with that, I hope you learned a lot. And if you think you did learn a lot, I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up and like the video. If you also like the content and you'd like to see more about stuff that works with PPC and stuff that works versus what doesn't work, and stuff that we've tried at our PPC agency, and therefore we know what works and what doesn't work, and have case studies and so forth, you should consider subscribing to our channel as well, because I'm releasing lots of information just like that or along those lines here, stuff that we're learning from the few dozen of clients that we have that run Google and Facebook ads and so forth, other ad networks as well. We put together that information and we share it with you or for you on this channel. I also actually though have a blog at guaranteeppc.com/blog with step-by-step instructions on how to build PPC campaigns the way that I build them here for our clients, and which we have to guarantee our clients' results. And so you can physically see there kind of how I mastered and built campaigns that guarantee results, how we're building them, and basically how to do that kind of stuff for yourself, run similar campaigns for yourself. So you might be able to also find good information and value there for your PPC endeavors and to make sales through PPC at your company as well. If you have any questions about anything I shared on today's video, leave me a comment down below. I get back to every single person who leaves me a comment on this channel, usually within 2 or 3 days time. And so if you have any questions about call tracking, whether downsides, upsides, anything, it doesn't matter, leave me a comment. That said, hope you enjoyed the video like I said, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.